The Texas Chainsaw Massacre Slaughterhouse game is a new game by Funko Games, which is a 2 to 5 player competitive game where one player plays as the family and the other players play together as the trespassers. It takes its inspiration from the original 1970s movie and has some light legacy elements. Okay, so let's set up this 1 versus all game. Place the house boards in the middle of the play area. Make sure they're orientated the same way. This is done by getting the weather vane, which is shown in the corner of each board, to face in the same orientation. Shuffle the decks, the desperation decks and the injury decks, and place them face down. Sort the tokens. These include the noise/fear tokens. They're actually the same thing, but they're double-sided. The search tokens and the fire tokens, and create a supply. Choose which scenario you'd like to play. The game recommends the who will survive scenario for the first time that you play. Decide who will play as the Sawyer family. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. And the other players will then play as the trespassers. For your first game, the most experienced player will play as the Sawyer family, which is the 1 of the 1 versus all. For the Sawyer family setup, place the chainsaw panic meter and the 3 Sawyer boards in front of you with the standard side up. Note, if there are 3 trespassers in the game, you could choose to flip one to the brutal side. This is to make the game more balanced. And then place a red cube on the start space of the panic meter, and then the highest space of each Sawyer board. Take the 3 miniatures associated with the Sawyer family and the Grandpa Mover, which is a cardboard token, and place the old man miniature in the pantry of the downstairs board, which is your starting area. Leave the other miniatures off the board for now. Shuffle the Sawyer deck and place it face down near your boards. Draw 4 cards from your deck. Take 4 fear tokens from the supply. Keep your cards secret from the trespassers. Take 4 random horror tiles. Look at them and choose whether to place them face down. You can place each horror tile in any named room with a white label on either board except the foyer, where the trespassers will start. Each room can have only 1 horror tile. With regards to the trespasser player or players setup, each player will choose a colour, take the respective board, take the respective mover, and take a cube, which they put on the 4 space on their board. Then you'll shuffle the personal item cards. You'll reveal 6, and then from oldest to youngest, which is what the rulebook says, each trespasser takes 1 of these items, and then the remaining ones are returned to the game box. And then the scenario will have a bit of SAP itself, so take the item deck from the freezer box, and then complete the item card setup as specified on the scenario card, returning only used cards to the box. Shuffle the item deck, and then divide it into 2 halves as evenly as possible. These make up the 2 item decks, and then place 1 half on the downstairs board and 1 half on the upstairs board. If 1 half is larger, use that on the downstairs board. Mix the vehicle cards according to the vehicle card set up on the scenario card, and place 1 face down on each vehicle space on the downstairs board. And the scenario may also have some setup instructions with regards to tokens. The game will always begin with the trespasser's turn. Each trespasser will take a turn. So this basically means in a 3-player game where 2 people are playing as trespassers, they will each take a turn, and the Sawyer family player will go. And in the 2-player game, it'll be exactly the same, with the single player playing the trespassers taking a turn with either of their characters that they're playing as. Okay, and the game will alternate back and forward like this until either all the trespassers have been killed, in which case the Sawyer family wins, or 1 or all of the trespasser characters have escaped. So let's talk about the trespasser's turn on each round. Trespassers will each take a turn in any order they like, which can change between rounds, and they will basically take 4 actions, and those actions are listed on their player boards, and they're also the number of actions they have left are marked by the cube, so you're supposed to move the cube to keep track. So you can move, which is where you move from 1 space to an adjacent space. There are dotted lines between spaces. If you move on the board over one of these red lines, that generates noise, which basically gives you a noise token. The named rooms can actually be made up of multiple spaces. The blue lines represent windows that can be moved through using specific abilities or cards. If you do this on an upstairs window, you can jump down to any space on the same side of the house. This is why the orientation of the boards is important. two parts of the board that have stairs on them, on the downstairs area and the upstairs area, are continuous and don't count as a space. What this means is you never actually stand on the stairs. You move from the foyer to the upstairs landing, moving between the two. Moving up the stairs will generate noise, and you cannot run on the stairs. The run action works the same way as move, but instead of moving a single space, you move two. To take the run action, you take a noise token anyway, irrespective of whether you cross over any doors, which are again are the red lines between spaces on the board. And then if you do then cross any red lines, you will take double the number of noise tokens, so 2 for each red door. So in this example, the yellow trespasser player moves from the dining room to the foyer using a run action, which means that they move 2 spaces. They take a noise token, and then because they crossed over the door, they take another 2 noise tokens like normal, ending that particular action with 3 noise tokens in front of them. They could then, if they wish to, take another run action. Other rules relevant to moving the horror tiles which are placed during setup. If a trespasser moves into a space containing a horror tile, a face down horror tile, that tile will effectively kind of go off. It's flipped and the action occurs. That ends the trespasser's movement action at that point. If you move into a space that has a vehicle card in it which is face down, that card will flip over. It may reveal a vehicle, it may reveal something which does something more negative in the game. The grandpa mover in the game, who isn't a plastic piece, if you move into his space, he also immediately stops the movement action which is occurring. And the Sawyer family player gets to roll 1 attack die against the trespasser players at this point. Just to show you the dice in the game, they're I think supposed to look like bones, maybe teeth from the first film. They have sides which are blank, sides which have a single slash on, and sides which have 2 slashes on. A single slash is 1 success, and 2 slashes is 2 successes, and a blank side is no successes. Fire tokens are also relevant to movement. If the Sawyer family player or the trespasser player, because fire affects both of them, move into or move out of a space with fire, they roll 2 dice are rolled against them, and the number of successes are applied to them. In the case of trespassers, successes result in injuries, which I'll talk about later, and in the case of the Sawyer family player, successes are reduce the number of actions that particular piece has for the rest of the turn. Another action you can do as the trespasser is a search action. So when your player piece is in a space that has a search symbol visible, you can take the action, which is a search action. You can roll 2 dice, and for each success you get, you can reveal the top card of the item deck. So if you're on the downstairs board, you take that number of successes worth of cards from the downstairs item deck, or vice versa if you're upstairs, and then you get to keep 1 of those items. So for example, if you searched this space here and you rolled 2 dice and you got 2 successes, you would take 2 cards off the top of the downstairs item deck. You would keep 1, and then importantly you would put the other one to the bottom of the deck. In the rules this is referred to as the card being buried, and it's important to say that the game doesn't feature discard piles. All the cards go to the bottom of the deck that they were drawn from. In the rulebook proper, it actually doesn't say that when you take the search action you generate noise, but the player boards do say this. So when you do this action you should generate noise. When a space is searched, the search space is covered by one of these search tokens. When all the search tokens, I believe there's 5, are used up, when it's the case that another one would need to be placed, the Sawyer player can then take 1 from the board and put it on the space that's just been searched. This means these tokens mean that this space can't be searched again until the token is removed. And then, because it's relevant here, because we're talking about searching, the trespasser players each have an item limit. So each player character can only have 4 items, but the personal items that they start the game with don't count towards this limit. And the final action is a swap action, which is basically when you share a space with another trespasser player, you can swap items between them as long as your item limit is not exceeded. And it's also important to say that when a trespasser is dead, which is indicated by the mover lying down, the items that they have remain on their bodies, and you can swap with them. Some of these item cards that you get allow you access to other actions, namely the attack action. So they're the actions. The other action which you can sometimes do is you can attack the Sawyers, and this is done by utilising desperation cards. These are cards that you get during the game which tend to give you powerful one-time abilities. These are provided by the panic meter, which I'll talk about later when it rises. The other way this is done is via the item cards, which you may find or you may start with as a personal item, and it'll basically say action in bold and then tell you how to you do the attack, basically how many dice you'll be able to roll. And you're usually capped as to how many times you can do this per turn. Okay, so they're the actions. So if you've taken all your actions, your cube then should be on the 0 space, and if it's not and you're electing to not use your final actions, you should move it to the 0 space. You now take your noise tokens in front of you. What you do is you roll 2 dice, and the number of successes that you get is the number of noise tokens you discard. This is a good thing because if you have any remaining, these are flipped to the fear side, if you like, and then handed to the Sawyer family player. The other thing you can do at the end of your turn, I say can do, but actually you have to do it, is if you're in a space with this eye symbol on with a cross through, you take your player piece off the board and you replace it with your hidden token. This is to represent that your character is now hidden in that space, and obviously not all spaces have this symbol. So after the trespassers have taken their turn, it's the Sawyer player turn. They'll start by drawing cards from their named deck, and the number of cards they draw for free is shown below where the cube is on the panic meter. They can also draw additional cards by spending 2 fear tokens per card. After drawing these cards, they can take turns in any order with their pieces that are on the board, which basically refers to their plastic pieces, because the grandpa mover doesn't take a turn, he just attacks if a trespasser moves into his space. This means at the beginning of the game you've only got the one piece to take a turn with, which is the old man. But as the game progresses and the panic meter rises, other pieces will be placed onto the board. Each Sawyer family member has as many actions as shown by the cube on their board, and then this number is reduced down by the number of successes done in an attack against that particular player piece. So as an example, if Leatherface had been attacked using the hammer and the player had rolled 3 die gaining 2 successes, that would mean that instead of having 4 actions at the start of the turn, Leatherface would only have 2. The actions available to each Sawyer family member are move, hunt, attack, and also any other action which is listed on their player card. Moving is just moving one space, following the same movement rules as the trespassers, but they do not generate noise, they do not reveal horror tiles, they do not reveal vehicles, they also cannot run. Just to say again, Grandpa cannot move on his own, but he can be carried. Just to deal with the fact that you can carry things, both the trespassers and the Sawyers can carry things when a rule or card specifically allows them to. The way this works is you must start your action, which is a move action, in the same space as the mover or token which you are carrying, and then the mover or token will go with you, and then you will drop it at the end of your turn. You can only carry one thing at a time, which can be one mover or one token. You cannot carry dead trespassers, and then because you'll be thinking it, can one of the Sawyer family members like Leatherface pick up a trespasser's mover, player piece? Yes, they can, and they can also move a grandpa who can't move on his own around the board. That discussion of moving brings me quite nicely to discuss the hunt action for the Sawyer family members. Basically, hunting is trying to find a hidden trespasser. So in this case, you're in the space where the hidden token is, which you can see because it's on the board. You roll 1 die. If you roll at least 1 success, that trespasser is no longer hidden. They put their mover back onto the board, take the hidden token away, and now they can be attacked, because they can't be attacked when they're hidden, and also picked up as per normal. And finally, each Sawyer player will have an attack listed on their board. Basically, this will tell you how many dice to roll when you're in the space as a revealed trespasser token. This allows you to do an attack. You roll that number of die, you count the number of successes. Then, depending on how many successes you have, you will draw that many injury cards from the top of the deck. And then you will pick one of the number that you've drawn to give to that particular player. So, for instance, if the hitchhiker member attacks this trespasser, they roll 2 attack dice, they get 2 successes, they will draw 2 injury cards, and they will pick the one which they wish to give to the trespasser player. The way these injuries work is they have some text on them which has some form of limitation, so none of them are good. There are 4 different types of injury: hand, foot, head, or heart. And then when a player has one of each type, they are dead, and their player piece is put on its side to represent this. So what this basically means is if you only rolled 1 success, you draw 1 from the top, and it would say a head injury, but the person already has a head injury. You can't then give it to them, because you can't have 2 of the same type, and then that would be buried, which, to remind you, means putting the card at the bottom of the deck that it was drawn from. If a trespasser is ever killed and they have 4 injuries, 1 of each type, we'll raise the panic meter, which is an easy rule to forget. Lay their mover down on its side. That particular trespasser is not going to take any more turns in the game, but their cards can still be swapped with by other players. The Sawyer cards and their use makes a large part of the Sawyer family player members' turn. Some of these cards can be played on the trespasser's turn, but this is made clear on the actual cards itself. They can effectively be used in 2 main ways. One way is the core text on the card, which will tell you how many fear tokens you could spend to utilise the text. So, for instance, this card called I Gotcha says that if you spend 3 fear tokens when a trespasser moves into your space, and this is occurring on the trespasser's actual turn, you can do an attack and interrupt their action. The other thing you can use a card for instead of the core text on the card is to take the effect shown at the bottom of the card. So just to refer back to the same card, you could take a free move action with that card. So you would spend it on your own turn and take a free move action. Some of these cards also allow you to do re-rolls and to increase the panic meter. When you're told to raise the panic meter, you raise the red cube on the panic meter chainsaw thing, and then what it basically does is if it says the word desperation above the cube, that means that each trespasser will get a desperation card. This means in the 2-player game, each trespasser player piece played by one person would draw 1 card, and then below the cube it also tells you how many Sawyer family member cards that player will draw at the start of their turn. Again, remember, they can also buy them as well. And then on some spaces shown in red, it says that another family member piece will be placed onto the board, like Grandpa or the hitchhiker. In these examples, they're placed in specific parts on the board, which is dictated on their card. And to remind you, the game ends when all the trespassers have been killed, or when trespassers have escaped. What escaping means is different, and it's explained on the scenario card. If one person escapes, but there's still trespasser players in the game, they'll continue till they're killed or escape.